Okay, so we can join our palms together. And if you want to open the chat and try to say it along, you can. You'll get it, or you could just listen to me say it, and at least you'll have a reference for how to say it next time. I could send like an audio clip too after class and the pronunciation. Okay, just praying to our gurus, praying to Krishna. And we can be enlightened by Krishna's words, who's acting as guru. And today is a very, very special day actually, because it's called Balarama Purnima, which is the full moon of Krishna's brother Balaram, who actually represents the guru in everyone's heart, the guru in the heart and the guru outside of us as well. So today is really the day of the guru, and it's a very, very potent day. It's a very potent day spiritually. So the fact that we get to study Gita together, we get 10,000 times the benefit of any other day. So the best use of this. Om Higyana Timirandasya Yananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrindam. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Feeling grateful, honored to be with you. We're going to try to cover all of chapter 1 today. All right, so you guys need to be like on point with your attention. When I first read this chapter, I was like, what the heck is going on? It's like a trillion different names, like a trillion different Sanskrit terms. I didn't really get like why you would start out a book in such a confusing way. And there's actually a lot of deep things happening in this first chapter that unless you read the commentary of Prabhupada and the commentary of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Baladeva Jabusam, who are a lot of our bhakti saints in the past, about 500 years ago, unless you read that, you can't unlock the deeper, relishable things underneath of the surface. There's kind of two main categories of things to experience within bhakti. One is called tattva. Okay, tattva. That's like the fundamental truths. Okay, those are like truths, and there's different tattvas. There's different categories of truth to learn about. And through the Gita, we're going to learn about that. In chapter 2, it's going to be a summary of like the entire Gita. We're going to learn about Guru Tattva, which is like the truth about Guru. Like, how do we know the foundations of Guru and how to understand Atma Tattva? Like, what is the science of the self? How do we understand the self? Like, there's different categories, which we call tattvas. Those are different categories of truth. Then there's what we call the rest. Okay, I'm just giving you guys this as like an extra little points kind of thing to understand about when it comes to understanding bhakti philosophy. Tattva is like understanding foundational philosophical truths. The rasa is really about the emotions that are evoked, and in specific, the purified divine emotions that are provoked experiencing divinity. And ultimately, all these philosophical truths are meant to get us to the platform of spontaneous rasa, of spontaneous, loving, ecstatic emotion with Krishna, who you can call whatever name you want. All right, I'm just going to use Krishna from now on because you guys all hear. Replace that word in your mind if you need to. That rasa is what we all search for in life. Rasa also means taste. It's like the taste, the flavor of life. And without spirituality having rasa, it is just like a dry philosophy. Like, why do you want like dry philosophy? Like, ugh. Right? Like, you need some juice, you need some taste, you need some spice. And there's different rasas we're going to learn about as we go. And these are really what we develop as we advance will have spontaneous loving attraction to Krishna, to divinity, to all living entities with these flavors of emotion we call rasa. Right? Does that make sense? I know I just went very high level for a second. And it is very high level. It's beyond my comprehension. Until I'm like a purely enlightened experiencing rasa at all times, I'm not very qualified to speak about rasa, but at least conceptually speaking, we can go there. This first chapter we're going to go through today. The purpose of this opening chapter is to kind of set the scene for the rest of the text, and set a scene for Krishna to really speak about what we want to speak about. Okay, Krishna is kind of like guiding and asking questions, and through the characters of Dhritarashtra. Okay, so last class we kind of distinguished between the Kuru dynasty, right? Like the antagonists, I should say, of the story, like those who are provoking war and who are very ignorant, who are just bent on getting what they want and ruling the kingdom and being ignorant. Okay, they're teaching us about ignorance in this chapter. That is what they're teaching. Like this chapter highlights the category of knowledge of ignorance. Okay, we get to learn about ignorance. And Arjuna, that's like the first chapter. Okay, so like verses 1 to 19 is kind of highlighting Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana, who are these two characters on the antagonistic side of the Kuru dynasty, highlighting their ignorance. And we're going to see how that plays out and what ignorance does to blind us. Okay, the second part of this chapter is Arjuna's ignorance. But it's an ignorance that Krishna kind of puts Arjuna under so that he can speak knowledge he wants to speak to him. So Arjuna, we know he's enlightened. He's already fully illuminated. For the sake of speaking Gita to the world, for the benefit of the world, Krishna puts Arjuna under a certain level of illusion, so that he replies to this scenario, in this example, this battle that he's facing. He replies to it in an ignorant way, which he kind of replies to it in a way that makes him seem woke, but Krishna destroys all his arguments. So we can see like sometimes our wokeness is actually a symptom of our ignorance. Sometimes we use woke principle to disguise the fact that we're actually in ignorance. And it happens to all of us. So that's kind of what the second chapter is. All right. Kind of gives all these different social arguments, why he can't fight. And that's what we're going to go through. All right. So the root problem of life, again, is suffering. Suffering is caused by ignorance. That's why we start the whole text by this zooming in on ignorance. And that is exemplified by the chapter of this, the title of this chapter, which is Arjuna Vishada Yoga. Okay, I wrote that in the chat last time, but Arjuna Vishada Yoga, which means really Arjuna Yoga of dejection. That's what Vishada means. He's completely dejected. He's completely at a loss. And for many of us, this is where the spiritual journey starts. Where like Krishna says there's 4 types of people that come to him. One is like the inquisitive. One is like the one who really wants to know the truth. That's the rarest. Very few people really want to know the truth. Very few people are just like a slave to truth. That's what a real spiritualist is a slave to truth. They don't care what the external packaging is of their spirituality. They're a slave to truth. Just like the one who's suffering. That's like the highest category. That's like the most popular opt-in funnel for people to choose spiritual and people to choose God. Is like, I'm suffering, I need help, I'm calling out. I'm calling out to something outside of me because right now, me being the controller is not working. Me being the controller is not getting me the results that I hoped it would. I know. And this is the start of the spiritual journey for most of us. There's some distress, okay? So again, as I said last class, the root of, what do I want to say? This dejection or lamentation that Arjuna's experiencing, which is really representing all of our own dejection and lamentation, is going to be proportional to the level of attachment we have to temporary things. You guys got that? Say yes if you understand. Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. And the root of that attachment is ignorance. Okay. So we're getting how all of this works. Suffering follows attachment to the temporary, and to the degree that we're attached to the temporary, we experience lamentation and dejection. The root cause of that attachment is ignorance. Okay, so I'm going to give a little text breakdown, and then we're going to jump right into the text. If you want to write this down, you can. I think it's important to understand this concept for us to understand ignorance properly. So avidya is the other term we use for ignorance. All right, you can write that. Vidya means knowledge. Avidya means without knowledge. And the core avidya, the core knowledge that we lack, that we don't embody, is the lack of awareness of our essential nature as souls, as spirits. Okay. That is the original ignorance. Okay. Then there's what's called asmita. Another kind of word for this is, what is it called? How am I forgetting the most word? Anyways, you can write this one first. I might remember that word. This is false ego. Okay. This is when we identify ourselves as our body and our story. I am my body, like I am this whatever-year-old person from this place with these beliefs. This is my story. These are my wins. These are my losses. That is who I am. That is called false ego. It's an identity, but it's just a temporary one, which is why it's called false. Those things are generally used interchangeably in the Vedas, false and temporary. Okay, because what is real is lasting, right? That's what reality is something that's everlasting. Okay, then we have our different corollaries. So raga, this means attachment. Okay, I'll get out of the technical weeds in a second, but this is important concepts. Okay, raga means attachment. Okay, this means that our conception of the world is that happiness is in things and a strong desire to possess those things. Okay, I want it. I want it, and when I get it, I'll be happy. It's the idea to be okay, you have to do or get something first. Doing means rajas, means mode of passion, means tamas, mode of ignorance, right? But sattva means you're okay in your being, and that's where attachment is lowest, right? Okay, then we have the opposite of that, which we call dvesh. Raga and dvesha. So raga is attachment, dvesha is aversion. Okay. I don't want that because it causes me suffering. I don't want that because I don't like it. Frustrated, and this generally, these two are linked together like two sides of a coin, attachment and aversion. When we don't get things that we're attached to, we become frustrated and angry, and we experience dvesha. When our attempts for enjoyment are obstructed, we experience aversion. I don't like this. Don't want this. Okay. And then the last one is called abhinivesh, which is really the fear of non-existence. Okay. And that causes us to cling. Yeah, ahankar. Thank you. That was like such a simple, for some reason, just like sometimes simple things, I'm like, I can't remember. Where I forgot people's names that like I've known for a long time. And I'm like, oh my God, how have I forgotten your name? Yeah, ahankara, right? False ego. So this is the abhinivesh is like what causes us to like cling to this temporary body and sense of self and conceptions, and like why defensiveness is the hardest thing to overcome, because we're really defending from non-existence, either on a physical level or an ego level. Like if you challenge my conceptions, if you call me wrong, like is that abhinivesh that's like getting triggered? Like, oh no, because I think I am my conceptions and you are attacking my conceptions, that is the fear of me, that is the abhinivesh activating. Does that make sense? Anybody slightly confused? I see some like, okay, okay. So we're gonna jump in. Any questions so far on this? Avidya is like ignorance, and then there's corollaries of ignorance, which is this asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesh, asmita. These are like the corollaries of ignorance. This is just like a more dynamic understanding than just like the blanket term ignorance. Okay. Okay, so let's read together. I'll put, this is a great resource to read the Gita online if you haven't found it already, but it's called Database. I put it in the chat if you want to read along with me, or else I'm just going to read. Let's see. Oh, verse number 1. So Dhritarashtra said, "O Sanjay, after my sons and the sons of Pandu assembled in the place of pilgrimage at Kurukshetra, trying to fight, what did they do?" Right? It seems like it's like a very interesting question, right? Because it's like, after after you went and like parked at the gas pump, what did you do? Right? It's like after these people assembled at the battlefield, what did they actually there's some subtle things going on with that question. So right now, Sanjay is going to narrate what's happening on this battlefield. Sanjay is like Dhritarashtra's assistant, and he's kind of using this yogic vision to see what's happening. He's like using like Apple streaming service to like see what is happening. Okay. He's live streaming this for Dhritarashtra, who's actually blind. Dhritarashtra is blind. Sanjay is narrating what's happening on the battlefield. Okay. And Dhritarashtra is like kind of evil father kind of guy, right? So this first verse, basically he's like making this, the first subtlety of this verse is that Dhritarashtra is making a distinction between the Kurus and the Pandavas. So he's like, my family, like my sons, after my sons, and like their sons, like even though it's the same family, it's like you wouldn't really say that, right? Like you wouldn't really say that like, about your family. So it was like this mood of like, even though we share this family heritage, I only see enemies, like already blinded to the truth that actually they're connected, And then another little subtlety here is this verse is Dharma Kshetra Kurukshetra. So Kshetra means like the place of, and Dharma means Dharma. So this place is literally called Dharma Kshetra, like the place of Dharma. So it was like a holy land. And part of Dhritarashtra's worry and asking about what happened is because when you take, like, for instance, drunkards or impious people and you put them in a holy place, he was worried that his sons might be influenced by the holiness of this land and decide to not fight. Does that make sense? Like an environment has a very powerful effect on the consciousness. Like try studying in a bar, right? Or try like getting super crazy. Like it just doesn't happen. There's mode of goodness environments, like things that are very enlightening and sattvic. This was one of those places. And so he was worried, what, like maybe they were influenced by how holy this place was. Okay. So some of the comments here by the acharyas, I'll read it to you. He said, "It's a famous place which produces dharma, this battlefield. Due to association with the right place, the evil Duryodhana and company could give up their anger and take to the path of dharma. The Pandavas are naturally following dharma. Then both sides would have the intelligence to see that they should not kill their own relatives and friends, and they would negotiate peace." Okay, so part of Dhritarashtra in asking this question, part of his ego was hoping that they would come to a resolution, be influenced by this holy place and not fight. And another part of his ego was hoping that wouldn't happen, because then it would ruin his son's chance for taking the throne. Like, it was like this split thing happening in Dhritarashtra's heart. Does that make sense so far? I'm going to try my best to do chapter 1. I am not an expert on chapter 1. It is a very layered thing. But I hope to give a decent understanding of chapter 1. In chapter 2, the concepts become very clear and nuggeted together. So, all right. So let's read a little bit more. Yeah, basically he was hoping, or he was both concerned, and part of him was hoping that the holy place would change their desires. Okay, he was both concerned and hoping at the same time, like different parts of his ego. All right, so we'll read verse 2 to 6. So it says, Sanjaya said, "O king, after looking over the army of military formation by the sons of Pandu, King Duryodhana went to his teacher and spoke the following words. O my teacher, behold the great army of the sons of Pandu, so expertly arranged by your intelligent disciple, the son of Drupad. Here in this army are many heroic bowmen, equal in fighting to Bhima and Arjuna, great fighters like Yuyudha, Virat, and Drupad. There are also the great heroic fighters like Drishtaketu, Chaitanya, Kashiraj, Purajit, Kuntibhoj, and Shaibya. There are the Yudhamanu, the very powerful Uttamaja, the son of Subhadra, and the sons of Jani. All these warriors are great chariot fighters." Okay, so he's basically like laying out, like, here's all the Pandavas, right? Like, here's everyone on Arjuna's side of the battlefield. And like, kind of like giving him like the scope, like, this is the power they got. All right, like, there's this bowman, like, there's this great fighter. Like, he's kind of scoping it out for him and giving a narration. So also a little subtle thing that's happening here in verse number 3, where he says, "Oh, my teacher, behold the great army of the sons of Pandu, so expertly arranged by your intelligent disciple, the son of Drupad." So part of this, what's happening here is Duryodhana is criticizing Dronacharya. Okay, Dronacharya was like a military guru of the Pandavas, right? And basically, like, this guy's on my side, but he like expertly taught all the people on the enemy team. So he's like, and look, arranged by your intelligent student, right? Like, you just trained all these people how to kill us. Like, look at how intelligent, right? So he's kind of throwing a little shade in there. He's like, so expertly arranged, right, by your disciple. But it also shows like that Dronacharya had great sense of dharma, because he taught the Pandavas knowing that they would be the end of his life later in life, because it was his duty to teach. So imagine being that great that you can do your duty so unattached that you're going to have a demise today or tomorrow, and the cause of the demise is those who you are teaching. So he had this awareness of that, and that is also what made Dronacharya great, this military general, very great. So he lists all these great fighters, and in the Vedic time, just to give you guys a perspective, at least from what I'm understanding, a Maharatha, like this is the name for like a very great fighter. This basically meant a man who could fight alone with 10,000 people. So this was a very, very expert fighter. And a Maharatha, all these warriors, especially on Arjuna's side, both sides, they were both expert in weapons, but they were also expert in Dharma and expert in the Vedas. So in order to be in a position, in a power position, there were a very high standard for your moral conduct, right? Like now we're seeing there's so much turmoil because people have guns and who are in power positions, whether it be people who do school shootings, police who shoot people, or the kind of like guerrilla warfare that we do now, like in the Middle East, like drone strikes, bombing like a whole village of like people because there might be some terrorist there, or drop a nuclear bomb. Like they wouldn't ever imagine doing something like that. There were like tons of rules of military engagement. Like you're only allowed to fight somebody who was like your equal. You're only allowed to fight them if they were turned towards you. Couldn't fight someone with their back away from you. You couldn't fight them if they dropped their weapon. There was like all these different things of like honoring like the lethal force, right? Everyone has their nature, and those whose nature is violence, violence can be used for good in defense of the innocent. Right? Like violence is just like an eternal principle of this material world. So those who experience like anger and violence need to truly understand the principles of Dharma so they can wield anger and violence in a right way. Does that make sense? Right? Like learn how to wield it in the right way. And so all of these people here, they weren't just like pilgrims with like drunkard pilgrims that like had bows and arrows. They're like extremely learned, enlightened people who had extremely high moral conduct and fought according to those codes. Okay. So then in verse 9, a little subtle thing that's happening too is he says, there are many other heroes who are prepared to lay down their lives for my sake. So he's pretty much already knowing that he's going to lose. They've already laid down their lives. And what this is going to do over the course of this chapter is highlight like ignorance, the attachment we have to our own ignorance forces us down a path that no is not going to get us a good result. And yet, because of that ignorance, we do it anyway. Like Duryodhana knew how this whole thing would play out. Like he knew. And because his false ego was so big, there's nothing after months and months of trying to reconcile the two families, there's nothing that could be done to overcome his false ego. Just like even Srila Prabhupada, he comments on this very heavily in all of our commentaries, that the false egos of a few men in power ruin the lives of millions of people throughout history. Imagine being so proud of your position that you are willing to have millions of people killed. Imagine having that big of a false ego. Like, just imagine. Like, I can't even imagine like one person, personally speaking. Like, that would be really trying. Like, I would kill somebody if I was defending my wife and I had to, or like whatever. But like, imagine just because I wanted to defend my false ego, a bunch of other people kill millions of people. That is what is happening. That is what's happening as an example now in this, when leaders are not fully embodying Dharma. When leaders don't embody Dharma, then everyone suffers. And that is also another highlight of this chapter, and it's going to be mapped out as we go on later. But in the past, the kings were called like Dharmaraj. They were called like Maharaj. They were called, I forget the other name for it, but basically one who is both a leader, a king, and a saint, pretty much. Imagine like if all of our like leaders were actually saints. like actually like in the real sense of the term, not just like by position. Like, okay, you got the position of being a saint. But imagine if by character, saints were the ones ruling and actually saw every citizen as a child and actually saw like, you don't have food on your plate, I will fast. I will fast, you have my meal. Like that is the level of dharma that was expected of these kings that the Pandavas, including Arjuna, were embodying. There's a story of like not even letting one of the pigeons go hungry or the hawks go hungry in his kingdom. So, okay, so then let's read a few more verses. We read 2 to 6. But for your information, O best of the Brahmins, let me tell you about the castes who are especially qualified to lead my military force. Their personalities like you, Bhishma, Karnapa, Ashvatthama, Vikarna, and the son of Somada called Bhurishrava, who are always victorious in battle. There are many other heroes who are prepared to lay down their lives for my sake. All of them are well equipped with different kinds of weapons, and all are experienced in military science. Our strength is immeasurable, and we are perfectly protected by grandfather Bhishma, whereas the strength of the Pandavas, carefully protected by Bhima, is limited. All of you must now give full support to grandfather Bhishma as you stand at your respective strategic points. Then Bhishma, the great valiant grandson of the Kuru dynasty, the grandfather of the fighters, blew his conch shell very loudly, making a sound like the roar of a lion, giving Duryodhana joy. Okay, so basically now what happens is both sides blow their conch shell, which is like kind of like badass. It's like, I don't know if you've ever been to a temple and like heard somebody blow a conch shell, but it's quite a noise. And so the Kuru dynasty, led by Bhishma, who's like this the fighter. He's the best fighter, like massive. He's on the Dhritarashtra's side, okay? And he blows the conch shell, and there's a tumultuous sound. But then Krishna blew his shell, and Arjuna blew his shell, and all the warriors on the Pandava side blew their shells. And it says it was a heart-shattering sound. Like, I don't know if any of you have ever heard a heart-shattering sound. There's very few sounds out there that shatter the heart. But like, for instance, when I was living in Florida and Leela and I were there during the pandemic, we were walking through this like boardwalk over a swamp. And there was like this very massive alligator, 12 feet, like 10 foot or 12 foot alligator. And I was like, you can't get us, like we're up on this big boardwalk or whatever. And then it like looked at us, and I looked at, and it made this massive growl. And we literally just like booked it. We just like out of there. And it was like an unimaginable sound. It was so loud and like so like that was like a heart-wrenching sound. That's like one of the few, I think that's the only example I can think of having a heart-shattering sound, but it like gives you no hope. You hear sound and you have no hope, right? Like luckily I was on a boardwalk, whatever. But like if that alligator was attacking me, I would have no hope. An 800-pound thing coming at me that roared like 10 lions. So that is what the conch shell of Arjuna and Krishna felt like to the Kuru dynasty. They blew these conch shell and it just shattered their hearts. They just already, just like, insert expletive. That's what was happening for them. So let's see. So basically what happens next, verses 20 to 23, is Arjuna asks Krishna, who's acting as his charioteer, to put him in the middle of the armies. Okay, he's like, bring me in between the two armies so I could see everybody who's here, right? And so there was a lot of subtle things happening like that are described in the commentary. Like for instance, there were different signs that Kuru dynasty was going to lose and that the Pandavas were going to win. part of that was all the different auspicious symbols, and symbology is very huge in the tradition of Arjuna's chariot. Like Arjuna's chariot had the flag of Hanuman, who was like the assistant of Ram. That was one symptom of victory, like the mercy of the great warrior Hanuman to overcome Ravan, who was, trying to kidnap Sita. So there was many different like symbols that were there. Let's see what else to say. Another like little subtle thing that's happening here is that Arjuna becomes controlled by his devotee love, or Krishna becomes controlled by his devotee's love. God becomes controlled by love. Like, who can control the controller of all? We have that ability. And how can we buy and earn that control? In our tradition is for the price of a song. Because what is a song? It's a vibration of giving love. It's a vibration of devotion. That is, we do mantra, we do kirtan, we do these acts of love. So even though God is like almighty, which in this case, Krishna is kind of like warrior Krishna right now. He's not like Vrindavan, cowherd boy Krishna. Even someone so powerful can be controlled by love, like, the Supreme Court judge. He's like almighty and everyone respects him so much. But one of Leela's teachers came over and he told the story. There was someone who was trying to get an appointment with the Supreme Court judge, and he was at his front door and he was knocking. His assistant came and he said, "Oh, can you come back? Like, the judge is busy." And he said, okay, I'll come back in 5 minutes. And he came back and he knocked and he was like, no, he's still busy. You need to wait here. And so he was waiting, like they had an appointment. It's been 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour. He knocks, he says, "Sorry, he's still busy." And then it was like an hour and he knocked and the assistant opened the door and he pushed open the door to see what was going on. And the Supreme Court judge had his grandson riding on his back. And he was playing like a horse. So the idea there, which I'm not giving it full justice, is like that love always overrides position. Love always overpowers power. And so Krishna became subservient to his devotee and took the role of being a chariot driver because he loved Arjuna. Right? I told you guys last week, like Krishna gave them the option. You can have me, but I won't fight, or you can have my army. The Kurus chose Krishna's army, and Arjuna chose Krishna. And actually, most of us think that being in control is when we'll be happy. But Krishna, who is God, who is the supreme controller, he gets his greatest joy when he's controlled. Okay, so like this is getting like, remember how I said there's tattva, which is like the philosophy, like we went through a lot of philosophy and like technical things, and then there's rasa. There's those things that evoke emotion for the scene, for Krishna, for Arjuna. Like we need both. We need both to nourish our spiritual life. Okay, so let's see. So just like, this isn't a deeper commentary. It's not here in Prabhupada's Gita. I don't want to say deeper, but different commentary. It's not mentioned here in Prabhupada's, but Krishna was kind of having this mental conversation with Arjuna during the whole battle. And when Arjuna pulled this chariot in between the two armies, Krishna was like, "What's going on? Like, why do you want to go here? We're here to fight, right?" And Arjuna was kind of like, "Well, I hope that we come to like an agreement, right? I hope out of friendship that we'll make peace." And Krishna was like, "There's not going to be any reconciliation. They're intent on fighting. like Dhritarashtra's ignorance has overridden him so much that he's blind. He's literally blind. And spiritually, he's blind. And even in the face of war, even in the face of knowing that he's going to die, his intelligence does not become sober. Generally, we need calamity to become sober. Generally, that is how humans become sober. I'm saying sober in the sense of like having a connection with reality, having a baseline of truth, having something you stand for and live for. Most people like need a heart attack to be like, wow, I've wasted my whole life. Like, what am I doing? But for Dhritarashtra, even like guaranteed you're gonna die, he still wouldn't give up his position. Imagine how thick your false ego has to be. Heart attack, still won't give up the fried chicken and smoking and 10 beers a day. Another heart attack, almost die, still won't give it up. Nah, I'm good. Another, still won't do it. Everyone's crying. Your whole family is tearing apart. Everyone's angry at you. Nah. People do it all the time. And we do it in our own way. This is not meant to tell the Dhritarashtra's story and Arjuna's story. It's meant to tell our story. This is our story. This is my story. Attached to my position in ways that harm me. So then basically in verses 24 to 30, basically Krishna like strategically places him in front of all his besties so that he just gets like this, the mass, like the most contrast. Krishna wants to create like the most contrast so that he can have this teachable moment. And that is what Guru does. We think like, oh, Guru is the one who says everything I already think. They just say in a more poetic way, and they maybe have an accent. You know, like they have like a beard, they stroke their beard while they tell me things I already think. Like that is a Guru. Like, no, like the Guru is like, here's the worst thing that could ever confront you. Now we're going to look at it. That is what a friend is. You're like, oh, I don't want to. But that is how we cut. Guru means heavy. That is literally what Guru means. Guru literally means heavy because they are very heavy. They bring you to sober state. They give you the heavy truth. Guru is cutting. The Guru is to cut the illusion. And the skill of the Guru is to cut without cutting out the heart. That is the skill of the surgeon, is cut out the disease without cutting out the healthy part. So of course, it's not all heaviness that should come from the Guru. There should be encouragement, there should be trust, there should be nourishment, there should be congratulating, there should be all those things. But the skill of a good surgeon is their ability to cut out the cancer without cutting into the heart, without cutting into the healthy part of the brain, without hurting the person in where they don't need to be cut. In the same way, that's the role of the Guru. They need to be an expert surgeon that can cut the false out without cutting the heart. But it definitely doesn't meet our preference all the time. Like Gurudev, like be a little gentle. It's like, okay, like you need surgery. Like I need surgery. I'm addicted to my false ego. I need surgery. If we don't come to that place of humility, we will be okay being sick. And that's sad. It's sad. So Krishna kind of like brings him to like this worst part of the battlefield where there's like all of his most loved ones on both sides. And he kind of like smiles a little. Like if you ever like had to give a teachable moment and you knew it was gonna bring up some contrast, like maybe Shay, like with your daughter, you knew like you're gonna bring up some teachable moment. Like you kind of smile a little bit because it's like that it's gonna bring out some contrast from your daughter. You like so Krishna was kind of like, and there's this slight smile. He actually, at many points, Krishna does this slight smile. And it's actually him holding back from laughter at Krishna's ignorance, or at Arjun's ignorance. That's what's happening. He's like, like when you have that one friend who just like won't listen and they're like stumbling around drunk or whatever, and you're like teach them a lesson, and you kind of like I told you, and you kind of like smiling inside, and like you're holding back from laughter, and you're like, hmm. That is Krishna all throughout this chapter and next chapter. He's just kind of like smiling at his students' ignorance. He knows that he'll come to the right conclusions. He knows that Arjuna is enlightened. It's a whole lila, it's the whole day that's happening. Krishna is relishing these moments. Disturbed. He's self-satisfied. He's all-knowing. He's not disturbed. So let's just try our best in the next 10 minutes. I'm going to go through a little bit more. So verse 27, I'm going to zoom in here. I'm just going to zoom in on a few key verses. So when the son of Kunti, Arjuna, saw all these different grades of friends and relatives, he became overwhelmed with compassion and spoke thus. Okay. He said, "My dear Krishna, seeing my friends and relatives present before me in such a fighting spirit, I feel the limbs of my body quivering and my mouth drying up. My whole body is trembling, my hair is standing on end, and my bow Gandiva is slipping from my hand and my skin is burned. I am now unable to stand here any longer. I am forgetting myself and my mind reeling. I see only causes of misfortune. O Krishna, killer of the demon." Okay, so this is the greatest moment of contrast right now. Like you are faced with something that makes your whole mind spin, that triggers every part of you to have like this nervous system reaction that's just like shut down, panic attack, exactly. Like have any of you ever had an experience like this where it's like complete overload and like complete like despair and like complete reeling? It is not a pleasant thing. It's not like a funsy kind of thing. And so basically what is being displayed here in 47 is it appears like Arjuna's duty is to fight against, fight is against Dharma. It seems like fighting is against Dharma because there's people on both sides of the battle. And it's like, as a distortion of ahimsa or nonviolence, he is avoiding his duty. So I'll give an example. Say you're getting robbed at gunpoint in your house and you manage to call the police before that critical moment. And the police come and they're like, "I'm going to meditate first." They're like, "Yeah, like, I don't know, hurt that guy. So I'm going to like chill out here for a while. I'm going to let you handle it. I'm going to do some meditation, some pranayama, do some vinyasa flow, and I'll get back to you." Right? Like that is basically what Arjuna is trying to do here in the name of non-violence. He's trying to distort the rule of ahimsa to suit his preference. So this is again how these kind of woke principles can be deployed in an ignorant way. Because actually, if he didn't do his duty, millions of innocent people would die. The world would be ruled by people who would destroy principles of Dharma and saintliness. Sometimes the most non-violent thing to do is to protect who need protection and employ force. And that, if you're a policeman, that is definitely your duty. If you're a warrior, that is definitely your duty. And so Arjuna, but also part of Arjuna, because of his saintliness, he was his parakripaya, that's in this verse too. Very high level of kripa, very high level of mercy, very high level of compassion. He was just showing warmth because he's such a compassionate person. And so all these different things that are symptoms of his ignorance will be shown to be also symptoms of his saintliness as we go through. All the signs of his weakness also be shown as his saintliness. And his saintliness in the guise of wokeness is actually ignorance. And they're playing back and forth. It shows how Dharma is such a concept that has to be finely applied. Just like a scalpel is an instrument that has to be very finely used. So is the principle of Dharma. So then verses 28 to 30, when, hold on, some silence. I'm just gonna close my window. So basically what's happening here is all these emotionally intense times are flooding Arjuna's psychophysiology. And now he's completely unable to use logic reason. Okay. So that is basically what's happening for him. Any questions right now? Okay. We only have a few minutes, so I'm gonna just cover a tiny bit more. And since you guys don't have questions, I'm just gonna cover a little bit more, then we'll end. Everyone take a breath. And exhale. So the first reason Arjuna gives, now he tries to rationalize. And my gurus very eloquently says, rationalization is the intelligence in service of the false ego. Rationalization is the intelligence in service of the false ego. And that's a heavy one. Like, I know, like all the things I rationalize, it's in service of an untrue part of me. It's in service of the part of me that wants to play small, part of me that wants to not act according to Dharma, part of me that wants to be lazy, part of me that thinks I can't do it. Whatever it is, I rationalize to protect that thing. And it's the intelligence. We're very great lawyers to create our own court cases of why we can't act according to truth and do what's right, even when it's hard. So this first argument is, let's see, verse 31, basically the verse says, I can't see any benefit from this. Okay. So like, even on a materialistic level, like there's tons of benefit to winning this battle. There's like kingdoms, there's fame, there's wealth, like those are all the results. Like there's definitely material benefits. But Arjuna was like, I don't want any of those things. I don't want any of those things. I don't want victory for wealth or for the kingdom. And the example is given that just as the person who's very sick has no interest in cooking food, Arjuna, in the same sense, he had no interest in winning this because he had no hunger for materialism. So he tries to use this as one reason. Then the next verses, 32 to 35, he's basically saying like, I can't see any enjoyment in this. Like this doesn't look enjoyable. Like these are all the ways we try to rationalize too, right? So that's the second one that he tries to use in this 32 to 35. Like what pleasure will we derive from this? There's no pleasure in this, not pleasure in me, and there's no benefit. The third reason he uses, you guys can write this down. It's like all the rationalization pathways. The first one, no benefit. Second one, no enjoyment. The third one is he was worried about karma. He was worried about karma. That's verses 36 to 38. Okay, but actually all the Dharma, they give the principles for who should and shouldn't, who can and cannot be killed. Okay, so the Vedas say like the arsonist, one who poisons, one who attacks you with weapons, one who steals, one who kidnaps your child or wife. Those are all considered aggressors that there's no fault in defending himself from. Right? Like imagine you're married to some dude and like some men come in to like kidnap you and like harm you. And your husband just like starts meditating. He's like, Shanti, I believe in ahimsa, like I just did my YTT 200 and I just learned about this. And like, I don't believe in harming other people. Like, imagine like what a man of Dharma you would feel like after that. You'd be like, that's bullshit. Like, how, like, this is not Dharma, right? So that's another one. So there's no fault in defending oneself. That's the principle here. You're not going to get karma because the laws of Dharma necessitate that you do take action. Actually, you'll get karma if you don't take action. You'll get sinful, like what here they call like sinful reaction. There's a big Judeo-Christian conception of sin. It's not the same in the Vedic tradition. Sin basically means that which is not beneficial for oneself. That's all that word papam or sin means in the Sanskrit context, not like you're a sinner and you're going to go to hell forever. It's not that context. So it's understood that a warrior should never reject the opportunity to defend. A warrior should never, like, look at the whole, like, not to political or whatever, but look at that recent school shooting that happened, which I don't know all the details, but from face value, from my ignorant perspective, the cops waited outside for 40 minutes or whatever it was, and all these kids died. And there was another shooting that happened like not too long after that, where a man like who was armed immediately shot the killer before he shot at the mall. This guy brought in an automatic rifle to shoot up all these people. And this guy, just a normal citizen, shot the guy right when he saw the guy pop out the gun. And nobody died except for the one who was attacking. There's no penalty for that. When he goes to court, he'll be found innocent. Right? Should have he done it? Of course, it's preferable that nobody got killed, but the situation called for it. We're gonna do like jujitsu him. We're gonna do like peacefully protest him. We're gonna do a GoFundMe, like a petition. No, you're gonna shoot him. You're gonna kill him. That is the nonviolent solution. Okay, so this is basically what was happening. I'm gonna give the last little thing here and just go another minute. So verses 39 to 42, it basically breaks the societal landscape of ancient India so that Krishna can speak about what he wants to speak about, which is karma yoga. Okay, so he like needs to talk about the world and like the societal situation so that Krishna can segue to what he wants to really speak about, which is karma yoga. Okay, which is basically like how to act in society as a spiritualist. That is like essentially karma yoga. Okay. So he's kind of giving some social principles that are necessarily spiritual principles, but basically this is a really important rundown. I'm going to give this, then I'm going to let you guys. He says the destruction of the dynasty. This will lead to the destruction of the dynasty. Okay? If we allow good leaders to be killed who are actually pious, who are actually holy, who are actually that, basically what happens then is there's a destruction of the dynasty. When the dynasty, which is based on Dharma, is destroyed, there's the destruction of family tradition and Dharma and refined conduct. Okay, and that had been the standard for thousands of years. Then basically what happens is when there's no principles, truth, and right being, then families, the next generation that's born, they engage in things that are not very woke. They engage in things that are harmful when there's no real principles that they're raised by. Okay. From that, women are primarily at risk. That is what this is giving the breakdown of. When there's men who are not woke, who suffers the most? Women. When real traditions of dharma and right being are not passed down to men, who suffers the most? Women. Okay, what happens then? Basically, women follow men in their natures, and a lot of unwanted population is born. Most pregnancies are not wanted. And this is not to get into a whole political thing. I'm not going to make any political stance, but just factually speaking, most pregnancies are not conscious planned pregnancies. And then what happens is you get unwanted children. And then society just goes loop, and society goes downward, principles are lost, dharma is lost, etc. And that's basically what's been happening for the past 5,000 years. Slowly, slowly, slowly. And now, in the name of progressiveness, we have no principles. We have no real foundation on which we can all stand and agree upon, because all tradition is bad, all old principles are bad. Woke means being free from any constraint, but really being free from any constraint means everyone suffers. There's no lanes on the road, dangerous. There's no laws on the street, dangerous. Okay, I'm going to answer this thing. They talk about how women were considered ignorant and without any knowledge. This is a huge topic. This is like, there's a bunch of like triggering things in the Vedas. This is one of them. It needs a proper discussion around it for us to really understand it. But from a very basic level, we're the one getting educated 5,000 years ago. Men were the one getting educated 5,000 years ago. And even recently. Now, guess what? Women are graduating from college more than men. Women are buying their first home at much higher rates than men. There's a manhood crisis. If you've ever read the book, The Boyhood Crisis, it's like tremendously saddening. That actually, my personal belief is all women's issues that they're facing right now are fundamentally men's issues. Because when you raise a broken boy into a broken man, it harms everyone. And that is where so many of women's problems come from. So women are considered ignorant. There's a societal reasoning behind that. And there's other lines of reason behind that. And that's something we can go into deeper, but that's the most big thing is from a societal perspective, women weren't educated. They stayed at home. They were from the father to the husband. That's it. It wasn't like a attack and ignorant. It was just like without knowledge. It wasn't like ignorant. It was like without knowledge, avidya. Because they just weren't going to school. So there's that. And I know it's not a very satisfying answer. And I'm the only man here. And I'm explaining to a bunch of women how women are less intelligent. So it's not super compelling, but we can go into it more in another class. I'm late for a meeting, gotta go. Love you guys. Message me in the group if you have any questions. This chapter was a little choppy. I hope you got something out of it. Chapter 2 goes into a lot of incredible concepts that we're going to spend a few weeks going over. I kind of rushed through this. A lot of technicalities, a lot of names, a lot of concepts, but I tried my best. Hopefully you got something. Hopefully you feel nourished. Hopefully you feel a little inspired in your spiritual practice. Did my best to serve you. And I love you guys. So hope to see you next week. Okay. All right. Hari Om.